I heard you being ready to hand that over to her.
Yeah, here, you take
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
She's on it, though. Nice try.
I'm happy with her being in charge of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's just like when you swear something's broken, the IT person shows up and they're like, it worked. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's
Yeah.
what happens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's in our blood somehow.
All right. Good evening, good afternoon. This is the, let's see, the October 14th Policy Committee meeting for MSAD11. My name is Tony V. I am the chair. I guess do introductions and like to do the
Sure. Melissa Tracy.
Colin McGough.
I'm Pat Hopkins, superintendent, and we have our guest here from the Teachers Association.
Yes, my name is Alan Yudsnukas. I am one of the co-presidents of the Gardner Teachers Association.
It's
Thank
so,
you for having me.
it's so great that you're here. Thank you
Yeah,
for coming.
excellent.
So before we get started, I guess on any of these policies, I just distributed 2 documents to board members and to Alan. So the first one is a spreadsheet labeled policy summary. Some of you have seen this before. Some of you, this might be new. This is the document that I created years and years ago now to help us keep track of our policies. And there are a couple things that we have to monitor. One, we have to monitor all the policies that we have and when they were last reviewed. Ideally, we review them every 5 or 6 years to make sure that they're current, and we are currently on that cycle. The other thing is certain laws have certain policies are required by law. Some are recommended through the Maine School Board Association. Some are just other, and some are required by law to be included in student handbooks. So this particular spreadsheet identifies all of that criteria so that we know whether we have all of our required policies or not. If the policy is missing, I also have a missing column here so that you can see that it's missing and it needs to be addressed. Okay, now we have color coded this over the years, and I will be honest, I have no idea at this point what all the colors mean.
Oh, there is a legend at the end.
Is there a legend at
Yes,
the
thank
end?
goodness.
So hopefully it's current.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing is I've created a different document this year that I haven't shared with you. It's just an internal document that identifies the various policies that are going to need to be worked on through the curriculum committee, and those that can just be done directly through our committee. Whatever's done through the curriculum committee will then have to be presented to us afterwards before it goes to the board, but they need to do the heavy lift. Jared Dumas, who is an assistant principal at the high school, Jared is doing his superintendent internship with me. And so this is going to be one of his projects in helping do some research on some of the policies and maybe making some recommendations on the changes that need to be made. He's going to start with curriculum. So he's going to start with helping Angela, because that's where a lot of those difficult conversations can happen, whereas some of the policies we're looking at are pretty routine, pretty standard, that we just look at the policies that are provided from Maine School Management, that those templates, and we make some modifications as required, or if the law has changed, we'll come in and make those necessary requirements. She is going to be doing teacher prep time, school day, curriculum development and adoption, those types of things that require a little bit more time and conversation. Okay, so the other any questions about this document?
No, actually, just while we're talking about it though, if you could just take a minute to reflect on the connection between, so policy committee, when you look at the policies, curriculum committee generates content for the framework that the policies provide. Is that There's a relationship between the two committees, I guess, that I wanted to.
There is, I mean, there is certain, the instructional element of running a school district needs to be captured in a policy. And so they're doing that work and trying to capture how we are providing instruction, what the workday, kind of those educational policy types of issues. They're helping capture that into a policy and then bringing it to you to formalize before it goes to the board for 2 readings.
Yep, okay, and almost in the sense that we get some templates from MSMA and from, the statutory pieces, it's sort of being generated internally to come back to policy
Yes.
in that sense. Yep, great.
Yes. The other document that I shared with you is not on the agenda. So if you're not comfortable in discussing it tonight, that's okay. We can add it to a future agenda. It's entirely up to you. But at the last board meeting, you approved a stipend for this new position, school board video production specialist is what we're calling, what Terry's doing right now, right? And we believed that there should be a job description to coincide with that stipend. So it's very clear what the responsibility is. Right now, Terry clearly knows what the job is, but should Terry leave us, which we hope she does not, but when that day comes, that we have something in writing. So job descriptions also come to the policy committee. So
do we want to do that separate, or do you want, as we go through the others, do we have to do any type of?
You would need to approve it the way you approve any policy.
Yep.
And since you haven't had a chance to read it, I understand, although it
pretty
follows the
so-
same format as
Yeah.
all of our other job descriptions.
Yep.
It's just under the duties and the responsibilities,
Mhm.
and really under the job goal. That's where the difference between the job descriptions can be found.
I mean, I'll just throw, it's pretty easy to read through. I'm fine with doing it now, if it saves everyone some anxiety.
I feel good
Yeah.
that we talked about it in the past on the board meeting, and it looks, it's an updated job description or a new position, but we've certainly done job descriptions before. And if we get stuck, we'll maybe table it or something, but it looks like something I think we should take care of tonight.
Okay,
Or move ahead tonight if we can.
great. So let's talk about that at the end after we get through. Okay, awesome. All right, so if we want to begin, Terry, would you like to grab my screen? That way, on the first page, people can see the agenda that we have, and you will see that we have an extensive list of job descriptions to review. And then I'm just going to get started. So the first one is the board superintendent relationship. And this is just a policy that hasn't been reviewed since 2015. So it's just due to be reviewed. I went through that policy. So Terry, do you or do I scan? So I went through and here are the modifications. One, again, at one point, I think I got really heavy-handed with the MSAD11. I don't know what I was thinking. But there's no need to have that many. Just as long as we identify it once that's MSAD11, we can just go with board after that. So there's that piece. Under D, I put in bold a sentence that is currently in your policy, okay? And it says that the superintendent will attend all meetings of standing or advisory meetings. That really is not a practice that is currently in place and hasn't been in place. And so I was a little surprised actually when I read through it. I do not necessarily attend the curriculum committee meetings. You have Angela, and Angela does that. Now I attend, of course, policy. Here I am, and I attend finance. But some of the advisory or ad hocs, I might attend some of them. It really depends on on what that particular committee is. So I wanted to bring this to your attention for you to decide whether you want that to remain in there. And if so, then that means that I will need to begin attending the curriculum committee meetings, or whether it's okay to remove this, knowing that I will attend meetings as, you know, as necessary and as required by the board.
I might look for your, I don't know, input on time management, but also how you navigate which ones you decide to
Well, I attend.
practice now.
Well, again, I attend this one because I lead this with you.
you.
Finance, even though we have a business manager, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be there. It's really important that I be present. The curriculum directors have always overseen and managed the curriculum committee meeting unless there's a real significant issue in which they wish for me to attend. And of course, I will attend if requested. Advisory meetings, I don't know, really, we have some ad hoc, but we don't really have any advisory meetings right now, so I'm not sure what that would even include at the present time. So it really, it's up to the wish of the board.
Can I suggest we just give ourselves some future wiggle room? So flip it and say, you know, the superintendent will attend other meetings and standing advisory meetings at the request of the board or board chair or something like that. So it's optional. It's not optional. It's on request. You might be asked to attend other meetings, but it's not part of the basic job description.
All right, so you would suggest that the superintendent will attend meetings of standing and or advisory committees when requested
But yeah,
by the board?
As requested by the board or board chair.
I kind of think punt it to the board chair. It's a little more efficient.
Yeah, that's,
And because if it became problematic, we could just have a vote on it. But
yeah.
Pat, does that feel equitable to you? Because I
Yeah.
think between you and the board chair, you'll know which ones are important and which ones.
Sure, and we certainly discuss most of the committees. And so you're right. There was a curriculum committee meeting this week. I was involved behind the scenes in those conversations, and the opportunity surfaced in which I could have attended if people wanted me there. I asked if my attendance was requested, and I was told no. So I'm very comfortable with this.
That makes sense.
Does that work?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
And I like that sort of future view just down the road.
You know, we could have like the Family Fun Day Popcorn Advisory Committee, and we don't need Pat to go to that.
Right, the fun ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. That's all that I have then on this one. Questions? Oh, I missed a his, her
Yep, there's a, wait,
under F.
there's actually a him, herself under D.
Under D?
Yeah,
Oh,
Gosh, I wish there was an easier way to do that, like
actually,
try and replace, but it's still like a tedious thing.
yeah,
Yep.
oh,
I know.
and under, I completely missed the pronouns in this policy, sorry. We spent a lot of time going through policies looking for that, and sorry, I somehow missed it on this one. Any other changes? Okay, then we're good. Moving on to BEDG. This is really hard. Do you think you could scroll these for me? Okay, because I get caught in the conversation.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know if you could do it from your screen.
No, I'd have to do it from your laptop.
Okay,
So I'm gonna take the whole thing back to the,
okay.
or is it a document you can just share with me? Just give me a laptop.
Smart lady.
And then
All right, there we go.
reject that. You've got paper, but I've got a,
Thank you. I found that while I hate to print out all of this paper, there are oftentimes changes that need to happen, and it's easier if I can make the changes on the paper. And so here we are with the minutes, and again, I missed another pronoun. Guess maybe I wasn't paying attention at the beginning here.
We're all adapting to that change.
Yeah. Really, that's the only, I crossed off one MSAD11, but I personally didn't see, or two MSAD11s. I didn't see any other change. And as a reminder, when I go through these policies, I go to the Maine School Board Association or Maine School Management website, and they have a database of policies. And so I pull up their policy, which is the template, and they employ an attorney. And that person is responsible for developing policies for school boards that align with the law. So whenever the law is changed, they go in and they modify the policy and then make it available to school districts. So by comparing our policy with their policy, I know it's in line with the any current statute.
Do we want to remove the very first MSAD11? I think it's on the very first page. Or do you, I think.
No, I
it
usually
kind of
keep the
makes
first
sense.
one, just so
Yeah,
that you
Yeah.
have, yeah.
that's fine.
For each policy.
Yeah, makes
Right.
sense.
Now, can I ask about something that maybe it exists in a different document, but I don't see a mention in here of where the board shall be provided with an agenda in advance of the meeting and whose responsibility that is. Is that actually not part of your job?
That's a different policy. So we have a policy on agendas, agenda preparation and dissemination. That's policy, right, BEDB, and that was last reviewed in March of 21. And in that particular policy, it tells you the types of, or when it's an agenda is prepared, who prepares it. If members of the public or members of the school board wish to have something on the agenda, what the time frame in which for that to happen, and then the dissemination and how we are to post it and make it available for the community.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else with BEDG?
Nope.
Okay, then the next policy, BHC, is board communications with staff. Now this one, there have been, there are some changes to this particular one. I've already notified the board on 2 or 3 occasions, right, that there was a new law put in place this year that mandates communication from the board to employees. Now, it doesn't specify how that's going to happen. It can happen in a variety of ways to be determined by the board. And so this updated policy takes that new law into account. So as you go through this, you will see that there are a number of modifications and changes. So I won't read it. I will just let you ask questions.
Are we on BHC?
We are on BHC.
Just going through it slowly.
Right, you still have minutes up. On the back page, under board communications with staff, where it says note, that will not remain in the policy that's officially approved, but I kept it here for you to read and to consider. I know Becky and I have talked about this, you know, what might communication look like? Yeah, you're televising your meetings and live streaming meetings that you didn't before, and that is one form of communication. So that could be done. You know, you could use this as one means. We don't have the social media. Attorneys have, again, not, the attorneys recommend that the school board does not maintain a social media account. We have social media accounts in the schools, but they advise that the school board not maintain one. But you could consider a newsletter. That is something I've talked to Becky about, that you could do maybe 2-3 times a year. Put together a newsletter or just a letter to staff. That's certainly an option for you.
Under relationships, your third paragraph. All communications or reports to the board or any committee of the board from principals, supervisors, teachers, or other employees shall be submitted through the superintendent. That's not what actually happens now. People email the board email account all the time, some of whom are employees. So it's not actually going through the superintendent.
Yeah. Although I am included, or I'm supposed to be included in the school board email account, so that I am receiving copies of those communications simultaneously with the board. You know,
I don't have a recommendation. I'm just noting that it's,
Yeah.
you're not actually being given the executive authority to control the
Right.
flow.
and the reality is, if people do not want to follow that chain of command and they want to circumvent, there's nothing that we're going to be able to do about that. We would just remind people what the process is and encourage them to follow that process.
It's there, I mean, are you thinking of like I don't know, the school newsletters? Or,
I think random emails that the
Just-
board will receive. You receive an email about a concern.
yeah,
I mean, I was even thinking, like 2 months ago, I think I remember we got a pretty impassioned email from one of the nursing team to the board, you know, and then further down in this section, we have right at the last paragraph of board and teachers and other school employees section, direct access between employees and the board. Sorry, direct access between employees and the board may be obtained through channels established for grievances or through applicable board policies.
Right.
So
And what's hard is when there are decisions that are made, when there are board decisions to be made, staff need to have an opportunity to voice their opinions to the board. And in that particular case, it was about the universal mask mandate. Generally, if the staff is going to communicate about a concern that relates to their job, that should not go directly to the board. That needs to go through building administrator. If they're not happy there, then it goes to the superintendent and follow that chain of command.
I mean, I would say if you feel the current system of channels and reporting is functioning well, there's no reason to dive too deep into the specifics of the language. But
just to tag on that, the second to last paragraph of board communications with staff kind of talks about not circumventing the chain of command. And that's new to the policy.
Based
Is that-
upon the new law.
No, based on the
Right.
new law. So yeah. If we're okay with the existing practice, it doesn't feel egregious to me right now, in that sense, but let's see, sort of putting it back in the box could be tricky. Or, this is our chance to sort of say, this is a new law, it's a new policy, we really want to.
But a reminder that when we
Yeah.
do have, if it is about if it's about a matter that is really around the functioning of the school, the operating of the school, then it's reminding staff of what that chain
That
of
there
command
is,
is
yeah.
and that they need to follow it.
Yeah, so,
And it's also reminding, I guess, for the board and for me, that when you receive a communication, to not just automatically respond and think that you need to take action, right?
right,
It's putting that pause, like, wait a minute, that's an operational thing. Pat will take care of it and I'll leave it alone.
right, just to be aware of.
Right.
Yeah, as a board member. Alan, any thoughts?
Well, I guess, as you said, I think it's our traditional and normal practice to try to go through Pat. Again, we can't monitor every employee's use of email, and I
Yep.
suspect that some of them still may contact you, but, I will certainly bring this back to membership, because I'll update them on what we've discussed and say, standard practice should be to bring it to your building administrator first, then work your way up. I don't hear a lot of folks who want to say, I gotta bring this to the boards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, I think, as you said, it's a good reminder, Pat, and it's, it's something we will try to continue to do, so.
And on our end, we try to do the same thing. When we hear a complaint to our office, my first question will be, have you talked to the teacher yet?
Yeah.
Have you spoken to the building principal? Well, let me help facilitate that, because that's really where the conversation needs to begin, so.
And the only other thing I'd throw in there is actually on that paragraph, like on the second to last paragraph, should we have a comma there after collective bargaining agreements, comma, and not to circumvent the chain of command of the direct supervisors?
Yes.
It feels like a dependent clause there that, although there's other commas there that are separating out those content areas, this is separating out the dependent clause, I think.
Yep, no, I agree. Anything else on this one? Okay, then the next one. The next one is BIC. It's your board member freedom of access law training. And again, the law has changed, effective on Monday. And
18th, yeah.
on the 18th, and now it requires that the superintendent and the assistant superintendent also receive training. So I went through and just provided some information and updated this. Now I will tell you, I have not received suggested language yet from Maine School Management. So there may have to be a little additional tweaking as we kind of go through the approval process. But I believe I've, for the most part, I have accurately captured what the new law is going to require. And I made an adjustment on the form as well, which is BICE, where it just said before name of the elected official. I then had to add superintendent or assistant superintendent. Is that okay?
Yeah, and that one's a one and done anyway. It's not like you do it every year, right?
No, you don't do it every year, but you have to do it every time you're if you're reelected.
Okay, very good.
And you have 120 days after your appointment. So after you're sworn in, that's when the 120 days begin.
One thing there with the new, on that, really the second sentence, it says superintendent and assistant superintendent. Should we put an article in there of the superintendent and assistant superintendent?
Sure.
Did it used to say like everyone or?
No, all it said before was every board member,
Oh,
whether elected or
yeah.
appointed, must complete.
Oh, yeah, must complete, yeah.
So I just
Yep.
inserted superintendent and assistant superintendent. So I'll add the. Right, anything else on that one? Then my job description.
Oh, my word.
Let's do this.
I mean, I know, right, but.
Really? I know.
It's missing the section where you bring snacks to school board meetings.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
right, there's a spacing issue here that I will fix, but, yeah.
That under performance responsibilities and criteria, the lettering goes straight from C to 4D.
No.
Okay.
And I had a question, but this is actually a sidebar under which section are we? Section.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, under E, committed to implementing the mission and vision statement of the school system. I realized I'd never read it, so I went looking for it and I couldn't find one. Do we have one?
it is
Mission.
old and outdated. We have what's called, an educational plan that does include a mission statement. That was created, gosh, back in 2011, 2012, maybe. We pulled about 100, or we invited about 120 people together and we worked on that. Right before the pandemic hit, Becky and I were talking about the need to reestablish that and to pull together another group to be looking at some sort of strategic plan and to update whatever mission statement that we had. So it is not pronounced, it is not readily available. It is in a old document that is obsolete. So that is work that needs to be done.
I'll just say, those are also huge time suck projects.
Yes, they are.
They take
Yes,
a lot
they
of
are.
hours in prep and all those things, yes.
Yes, they are.
Same with E2, so it references that you perform your job responsibilities using the aforementioned mission and vision as a guide to your work. So
Yeah. There have been a few other things that have been guiding me these days. There is no shortage of work, that's for certain. Everything else, okay? There's a lot for me to do on a day-to-day
I just know you
basis.
have delightful people skills, like it said, so that was perfect. That's what I scrolled through. My goodness. It's pretty clear.
Thank you.
And actually, this is refreshing for me because I do look to you as, you know, having a sort of comprehensive and maybe at times encyclopedic knowledge of all the stuff. I mean, the buildings, the laws, the, you know, the curriculum. And it's good to see it written out like,
And I have to say, you know, it really is a unique position. How many CEOs are expected to
Right.
know absolutely every single element of their business and be held responsible for it in the same way a superintendent is? It's unique.
yeah, it moves from very granular to, you know, very 30,000 foot view.
All right, then we have the evaluation of the superintendent.
can I ask what the past cycle for evaluation has been? Because it's not actually spelled out here on a fixed timeline or
Well,
cyclical timeline.
it, for years, it was done annually. I think the last couple of years, it hasn't been to the same degree. When I first arrived, I'm gonna say the first 7 years or so, it was a very comprehensive system. Every board member is given a copy of the job description. There was opportunity for feedback and ratings. Administrators I know were surveyed. Some staff members upstairs were surveyed to get feedback. Becky then worked to condense it because there were a lot of board members who really found it difficult to answer all of those questions and to provide meaningful feedback. And you all have different roles and different interactions with me, and so it made it difficult. So she really tried to condense it. Last year, the board did not provide a formal observation or evaluation because of the pandemic. But generally it's done annually.
Is that a frequency that you would suggest as being most useful to the effective performance of your job? Because I know some other people, not as superintendents, but similar type roles, and you know, every 3 or 4 years, but once a year, it honestly eats up too much time compared to what you get out of it.
I would concur. And I think every person is different and the impact and the benefit for each person is different. I could tell you exactly what your recommendations will be, what your recommendations aren't, you know, I know myself. I know what my strengths are. I know what my weaknesses are. And so I would find just the dialogue to be the most beneficial and just having an open conversation versus going through the process of spending hours creating a summary of all the work that I've done over
Yeah,
the
that would
year.
be like
It's just, it is a time sucker.
very
So-
comprehensive. We would usually have, so I did it once since I've been here. I was gonna say the first year. And we just had an executive session and Pat left and then we invited her back. It was pretty brief, like she said. I mean, we kind of, I think I've learned as well. She's very thorough and organized, and that's why I lean on her for the knowledge. And so it's pretty easy to kind of go through. It's nice to see it, but it's pretty comprehensive. So clearly.
Yeah, and I think it stands out. I mean, it takes time for the board, but your evaluation, I know you do a thorough, the ones I've seen have just been extensive and thorough, and you hold yourself accountable in that. So it's nice to see, and I don't worry about it. I don't worry about it with you. Obviously, it'd be good to have in there. We have the flexibility to say it's a regular and scheduled activity for the evaluation. That first sentence, either do we need to, would it be helpful to redefine that as a biannual thing, or is that something we can?
That's entirely up to the board. You absolutely could do that.
Or that's something we could even just vote on as it stands, right? We could just sort of say,
Right.
let's do maybe more the discussion, if that's.
Yeah, this is completely in your purview to make those decisions.
Because
Now,
it's-
we
yeah.
have for our continuing contract teachers
Hmm.
and for our administrators, remember you just approved last year, was it? An amendment to their evaluation process, and they're all on a 3-year cycle after they get off probationary status. So
Hmm.
if you switched it to a 3-year cycle, it would certainly be in line with the rest of your professional staff.
So clause B under guidelines, at the moment, they're not regular and they're not scheduled, so we're not following our own policy. So I wonder if we strike that and instead say the board will annually assess the need for performance evaluation for the superintendent. So once a year, it's got to be on the agenda somewhere if we're going to hold one.
You could, I mean, the board voted last year.
But they-
They
Yeah.
voted not to do the evaluation. It wasn't that they just skipped it.
Right.
There was an official vote not to do it. So, yeah, I'm really open to whatever. This is one of those policies where there's enough flexibility that you can do what you would like. The other thing here, I put under D2. D2, I put in bold that you would develop a composite evaluation, which is what Becky has done in the past. But then under E1, it says that you should include the composite, and well, then it said or summary. And I just wanted to make sure that is indeed still sufficient. And that a composite meets your needs, and it doesn't have to be the raw data that is shared with all of the board.
I would support that. I've seen that be much more effective than getting like 10 different evaluations in a stack and trying to make sense of them.
Yeah, nice.
Okay.
So
what's your wish?
Let's see, so on one hand, I think we have kept up with it annually, except for last year, right, when we voted to not do it, partly in response to COVID. I like the flexibility of leaving it as it is, but Cullen, your point that it might be good to identify what regularly means. I mean, this.
I'm thinking Pat gets, taken up by the space aliens, and we have a junior superintendent who's new to the role, who's going to need a lot more evaluation than somebody who's seasoned. I hope that doesn't happen, Pat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you want to say something like annual review and determination, something like that? Like, I don't want to use the word review, but you know what I mean? Annually review if we determine to do it, something like that.
I kind of like that. Yeah, that it puts it on the agenda for, once a year, we'll come to it and which has fundamentally been the practice except for COVID. And it, puts it under.
Terry, that's disappeared again.
Yeah, I'm showing that you guys talking.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking. Let's see, we do have sort of a chance to sort of shift it if we did want to move to that 3-year cycle. On one hand, you have an important position and are the sole employee of the board in that sense. But I don't see that you should necessarily be under, annual probationary review.
Do you want to go with like the board shall conduct an evaluation no less than once every 3 years? That lets us do more if we so choose,
Yeah.
but it means we also can't walk away from the job undone.
Yeah, right, that it puts a time frame in there, which is, right now, it's very loose, and it's, been something that we've just been doing, but I like the idea of expanding it to something that fits a little more with other professional evaluation practice in the district.
If we do it once every 3 years, it also means that any elected official has at least one chance in their tenure to provide that level of feedback. I mean, that gives the voters
Yeah,
an avenue.
yeah. Should we put in, now that we're talking about it though, obviously that there would be a probationary procedure for a new superintendent.
Again, that really depends on the board. If you say no less than once every 3 years, then the board at their discretion
Could,
gets to decide
Yeah,
whether
good
to
point.
do it annually
Right.
Yeah,
without changing policy.
Yeah.
So I like Colin's
okay.
recommendation.
Yeah, it captures it and gives us a little leeway in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
It also
great.
gives us 2 more years to kick the can.
Yeah. Yeah, no complaints with that either. All right, anything else on that one? We have a lot to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the next one is CHCAA, which is student and staff handbooks. This again is a policy that you already had. Let's see, looking at the student handbooks, in the second paragraph, your policy said MSAD11 board or school administrator shall conduct. You can't have board or.
Yeah,
You need to
no.
pick one, all right? You need to select one. And then it also talked about any substantive revisions are to be reviewed by legal counsel. You might want legal counsel, but do you want to mandate legal counsel? Because it may not be necessary, because some of the substantive revisions may come from a change in law, right?
Right.
And so we're just making the changes align with changes in the law. And do you then want to spend additional money to have an attorney review it?
Can you remember why that got in there in the first place? I assume there was a point of contention.
That would have been before my time. That's been in there all along.
Adopted 1986, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been before my time. I've only actually reviewed this policy once, Cullen. I arrived in September of 2010. And this was reviewed in August of 2017. So that would be the only time since I've been here. And I just don't remember why I didn't catch it before or.
So I'll stick my neck out. In the first paragraph, it says it's the responsibility, the administration shall publish and annually revise the student handbook. If that's the case, I think like the diligence is then on the board to review it. Because
Yeah, I
otherwise you
agree.
have the same person revising and reviewing.
Yeah.
Here's the challenge, and I hear you, okay? Here's the challenge, is that administrators are unable to update your handbooks until summer, right? It's during the summer months. Otherwise, they don't have time. Plus, there are just changes that occur. So they're updating it oftentimes in August. If you want the school board to review it, you want it reviewed before it is released to families. And I have administrators updating it just weeks before it needs to be released. There is not enough time to go through the board review process in many cases. And so, or many instances. So I would like to be able to share it with the board. I just don't know how to get around that hurdle.
There's a timing piece.
How
to
about
it.
a clause like, the contents shall be in conformity with all board policies?
It already says that. Right
Then
here,
we're
the
good,
contents
because
of
if-
student handbooks must conform to board policies, administrative procedures, and state and federal laws and regulations.
Well, that seems sufficient, because then if a handbook got published and there was something in it that didn't fit, then we clearly have an avenue to come back and say.
Well, and the legal
Yeah.
counsel thing says first editions. We're obviously already beyond first editions.
We're
too.
well beyond
We
first
don't even
edition.
need that whole paragraph, do we?
And when we're looking at any substantive change, then those changes are going through a process. For example, most recently, we have all of the conversations around graduation standards. And so that conversation has occurred at the curriculum committee, and then it's been brought to the board. So as soon as appropriate, the handbook will be updated to reflect those decisions that have been made at the board level.
Yeah, so it's kind of like we're reversing it to reverse back. That doesn't make much sense, right? We're doing like a reverse loop. It's almost like we don't need that paragraph.
I like Alyssa's suggestion that we strike it.
Yeah,
Strike the whole paragraph?
I think so.
Would-
Because the other thing is you're covering what it has to be part of, and you don't even have to get into the when or how the revisions and all of that.
So, sorry, which paragraph are we talking about? This
Second
second
paragraph.
paragraph, just
Yeah,
get rid of it
yeah.
entirely.
Because again, that first paragraph, handbooks must conform to board policies,
Yeah.
administrative procedures, state and federal laws. If something made it into a handbook and that was not true,
Right.
I feel like we'd be within our realm to say, you gotta pull it and redo it.
Could we pull the, just to add in the substantive revisions, the contents of student handbooks and revisions, or?
But the contents, by its nature, would
Should be-
Would
include
reflect
revisions.
Should be,
anything.
yeah.
Okay, yep,
Right.
great, yep. I'm okay with that. Part of me actually I'd like a board review of it. But that seems like a good thing for the board to know what's going out to the students, even as we do maintain our 30,000-foot view of not getting, the board is not involved in the day-to-day stuff. But that could take a fair amount of time out of, even if it's just a review, it's just a post review after it's been
And so
distributed.
how would you see that occurring? Would that be the entire school board and spending time at a board meeting? Would that be the policy committee? That you would have it would be
Yeah.
sent to you as kind of a sign off?
Well, can't you just, so I think what you're getting to, Tony, maybe it's easier, just the last paragraph will be distributed to all students and the board the first week of school.
Actually, that might be good, just to make sure the board has,
It's the same communication channel, the same time. Any updates, like you just described, Pat, are in the summer anyway, so they should be done by then, and if that's the practice, right? Then it's on us to read them.
I can do that and make sure that that administrators are aware. Keeping in mind, when it talks about distributing,
Right.
we don't make hard copies of
Yeah,
these
no,
things.
no,
These are now available on websites, right?
right.
And so the board actually has access
has a remote access. Okay,
at any time.
And that's really what we did with students too this year, right? I mean, it wasn't really printed and,
Correct.
yeah, so,
okay, good.
And so
Is it the
maybe,
notification piece that you want to be in the loop on, like,
maybe that's it.
the board
like-
shall be notified of any substantial revision to the student handbook? That just means we get an email, go look at it, guys.
Yeah.
But it should only be before school starts, right? I mean,
Well-
that's sort of, we're back to that. That's where I'm like, yeah,
Hopefully, like, the future is a little murky on
yeah, I know
how
it.
employee and student
Right.
handbooks work, like, they're perpetually,
Exactly. They're a living document now. They're not just a stagnant thing anymore, really. So,
And as we say,
Okay.
handbooks shall be distributed, we probably should say handbooks shall be made available.
there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
because then the fact that it is a living document, you can go look at it at any time,
Yeah.
like we did
Correct.
last year when we had to change all of the
Correct.
words and such. Yeah.
what was the founder's intent of that student handbook?
Yeah. I think, so you could, the good students could carry it around, right? And- Right,
So, I'm okay with striking the second paragraph. I appreciate the discussion we got going here. I think, yeah, handbooks will be made available to all students. Is that what we just said,
Yes.
or you just said?
Pat, if you're gonna edit that, could we make that students, parents, and board members?
Or, I mean, it's a public document fundamentally, right? Or because,
To all will be made available.
It's made available?
yeah, this is.
Yeah,
where
I
you
mean,
get
it's
into-
available to anyone.
Yeah.
I can go to
Okay.
Cape Elizabeth and get
Yeah.
their
Get their-
handbook.
You can just Google it and get any
I
of
can
them,
I can get
really.
anyone's, and I
Yeah.
do. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But I wonder what they're doing. and I
Exactly.
can look at it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, we're going to be working on, one of the policies that you're going to be working on this year will be the student dress code.
Hmm.
Chad's been doing some work there.
Yeah.
We'll have to see how that applies to the middle school and the elementary school. And I did some research for Chad and found some other dress codes and, you know, just send it to him. So,
Yeah.
all right, so we'll just leave it, that will be made available the first week here.
yeah,
Okay.
Yep.
And we're deleting the second paragraph.
yep.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sorry, just one other thing. Do we want to specify that it'll be on a, digital platform or just leave it? I'm actually inclined to leave it. Will be made available. That keeps us,
Yeah, wide open.
yeah, we're
Yeah,
doing
because
it.
who knows what
Yep.
tomorrow's technology will
Yep.
be, right?
Yep, it's true.
I mean, it's true, absolutely.
Yep.
Keeps us
Right.
right.
Then the next policy, CHD, is administration in the absence of policy. So if there is no policy, then I have the authority to make decisions when I need to act. And then it's up to me to notify the board when I have to do so.
I'm okay with it. I like that we have a policy for no policy.
Yeah, and I can't even sit here and tell you, I was trying to think about this
Oh, an
earlier.
example, like.
An example
Yeah.
of when I've had to act in such a way that there's been no guidance for me to operate within. And that has required me to notify the school board. And just nothing comes to mind.
Well, if you ever wanted a lawsuit, that's how you get a lawsuit, but it's such a legal black hole for you.
As long as I'm acting in good faith,
Yeah,
Yep.
everything can be a lawsuit.
yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. DHGJH is purchasing and contracting procurement staff code of conduct. There's no significant change here. Just some minor changes, and I did change the pronouns through here. And then I noticed that the legal references that we had were not current.
Good
So I
catch.
updated those as well.
Did you notice that from the comparison of the?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
Questions, comments?
I assume again, like you just said, there's no examples you can think of where we have to get particular about nominal value, so I'm not gonna ask that question, you know, like, that's just the way it is, yeah. makes
Yeah,
sense.
I mean, and it changes. What was a nominal
know.
value 5 years ago is not now.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, then the next one is the camera system. I did not make any changes. This is the policy that we have in place, and I don't have any recommended changes.
Can I ask another sidecar question related to this, which is, I was poking around the website again. I didn't see a place that had the data use policy, if there is one, about how the district stores, maintains, or shares, or disseminates
I don't think we-
information, student records, recordings. I'm asking because recordings, especially video, is increasingly becoming vulnerable to algorithmic search features. So, and I think it's important that somewhere publicly we have a data use statement available to parents. We have videos of your kids. What's our rule?
Terry, can you
And we can come
respond?
back to that at a different
We do
meeting.
have some policies saying that the only thing, if it's put online, parents have to give permission beforehand. And, you know, like no names, first name, groups, no identifiable information. But these policies were made before social media became really, really popular. So they probably should be looked at again.
And our camera systems, are they closed circuit or are they in the cloud somewhere?
Our camera systems are on site. And they are behind our firewalls. However.
Right, I was gonna say, yeah.
They're digital.
You can crack into Google, you
Yeah.
could crack into our camera systems, but it would not be as easy as one would think.
Again, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't do it. I think it's the disclosure to the parent that's the key part. And I'm also, you take a look at where Europe has adopted the, what is it, the DRD? That can open up a really sticky place in the future if the United States ever went there.
Can you review that for a second?
Sure. The European Union a couple of years back moved to a legal requirement that anybody requesting removal of identifiable data records from a system, that business or organization must comply with it. And if you're not set up to handle that, that can become really burdensome. Video is one of those things. It's identifiable data retention.
So a parent could say, I want all data of my child erased or removed, and
Right, we'd either have to do it all or nothing probably, or there'd have
Okay.
to be some hunting and pecking to find it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we're not prepared to do that.
And exactly,
Nobody in the US is, so this is not like a.
yeah.
No. Actually, I'm jumping ahead to the recordings. Actually, I think that's a great point. It looks like the next policy talks about recording, how we maintain the recordings. And I wonder if that might get at it as we jump ahead. Because this one, I think, doesn't even talk about the recordings, right? The ECAD doesn't talk about the recordings, just the cameras themselves. And then the next one looks like it talks about administrative and talks about viewing of recordings and then storage and security of recordings.
Confidentiality, yeah.
So let's just, I want to just come back to that idea and see if it meets some of that in a second.
It does look like it says they're only supposed to be stored for 60 days.
Yeah, so ECAD, just to stay focused on that for a second. Let's see, seems okay. Do we need to say something in here that recordings are being made from these cameras? Or
I mean, below 3, notices will be posted in public entryways to the buildings and other conspicuous locations of moving persons. The buildings and grounds are monitored by security cameras.
okay,
So
I mean, I'm okay with it as it is, and given that the next one,
The next one provides the deep.
the D,
Yeah,
okay,
I
yep,
think so.
Right.
I'm good with ECAD as is. And then,
And according to your color coding, these are on the ones that also have the curriculum committee as looking at them just as an observation. The purple.
I thought golden,
Oh, sorry,
Goldenrod.
policy committee, thank you, that makes more sense. Yeah, and I guess it, to sort of spill off that, I don't assume that every administrator or building person knows how to handle the kind of what it's saying in here. The building administrator and otherwise will consult on where they're located, may approve and view. I don't know, is that what happens now?
So do you want to talk about that? We have all new camera systems.
Okay,
Security
so-
systems that went into went into the schools last year.
Okay.
So
It was last year.
Terry's,
So the principals do know how to look at the cameras, and they do look at the cameras. There are very few people who can actually export, and the exports are only given to Pat, or when Pat tells us to give it to somebody else. So if we burn a DVD or a thumb drive of a recording, we hand it to Pat, and Pat hands it to someone else. But they are able to watch the live.
Okay, so I think we're covered in the sense of, as it says later, we only, if we are recording, there's a limitation of days, it's that, I can't think of the term I want to use.
They can view live and they can do recorded.
Okay,
You know, obviously they could take their cell phones out, anybody. if
Oh,
you
sure.
see it,
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
record it.
yeah,
So
what do I want to say, like the,
police officer can see it.
yeah, but
I can see it.
the holding of the item is sort of in your possession, so you know what to do with it. Why can't I think of the term I'm trying to think of? Yeah, you know, like you give it to Pat, and we know Pat is the one that knows what to do with it, the possession kind of thing.
Chain of custody.
Thank you, that's it. So maybe that's the part that we can kind of put in there that just says that, you know. I don't know if that would sort of cover the only place it could be exported would be to the superintendent, and the chain of custody would be.
Or her designation.
but it already says that the school employees may be authorized by the superintendent, okay, to view. So I have to be a part of that decision-making.
Yeah, good.
Let's see.
authorized by a superintendent.
Yeah,
Actually,
Yeah.
it says authorized by superintendent or a building administrator. Should we pull or a building administrator out?
No, I don't think so,
Okay.
not in that regard, because you may have a situation where you have a parent who wants to see what their child was doing.
Right,
And I'm not sure that you want me to have to be pulled in every single time
right, to
an
do that,
administrator is making the decision that they're gonna sit down and share.
right,
Um, And then parents do have, looks like if there's a disciplinary action, that the recording forms a basis of.
I think it's important to note that they are the cameras on the buses as well.
Yes,
Oh.
yes, our cameras on the bus are exceptional. The new ones,
nice.
they are exceptional.
Should-
We can see all,
That's good,
we can hear a lot.
yeah.
And are those live and remote?
They are recorded live, yes. So remote,
I meant streamed, I guess is what I was saying.
no.
From the bus.
No, so if there is a live event going on in the bus, yeah, we're not going to be able to see that. Whenever there's an incident, we have to wait for the bus to return so that we can grab the video and watch the incident.
The video cameras in the schools do not record audio on purpose. Only video.
I think when I read section C, the viewing, what's not in here is it's not explicit. And maybe Pat, you can talk about the process a little bit more. It's not explicit that there's all these people who may view footage under certain conditions. There's no explicit admonishment that recordings may not be duplicated, shared, copied, given however you want to say it.
Without the superintendent's permission.
Yeah, exactly.
Should we, were you thinking to have paragraph 5 in there, all, all copies of any recordings must be submitted chain of custody through the superintendent?
If you give me 1 second, I want to read through 1 through 3.
Sure.
See, like the verb to view is really interesting. Like, does that mean because I gave you a copy on a thumb drive or a DVD, or is it because I invited you into the office to look at the monitor?
Could I ask that maybe we table the administrative procedures? And maybe Terry, you and I could work on this a little bit more, because as I'm reading it, I'm looking at number 4. And looking at the law enforcement, and they may review security camera recordings when available.
We need to have some.
We need maybe a little more information here, like they're not allowed to have copies unless I receive a subpoena.
Right.
There are certain confidentiality requirements, there are legal requirements. And so maybe we do need to, while this says viewing, maybe we need to add a section
Yeah.
that talks about providing copies to others. That would include law enforcement needing to have that subpoena in order for me to access. And you and I have attended some of those law conferences that really talks about technology. So if we table this, maybe you and I could go back and find and strengthen this a little bit. Would that be okay?
I think that covers where you were kind of heading in a way, because that's exactly it. It's that sort of chain of custody. Thank you for that. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm okay with tabling. That sounds good.
Okay, all right. So we'll do a little more work on that one.
Thank you.
Then let's do the Gbgb. And what I suggest is that we rescind that one. Okay, that is no longer the file that is being used by main school management. Instead, it's Gbgb, and they actually have a new policy around staff conduct with students that is a bit more thorough than the Gbgb. So I just get rid of the old one and let's look at the new one
Yeah.
instead. I remember us having extensive language last time that we reviewed staff conduct with students, especially around the conversations dealing with social media, and understanding that while staff should not be engaging in conversations in social media or texting and those things, there are also situations in which it's a small community and they may be friends of the family, and there may be circumstances where it is appropriate. So making sure that the language in the policy is narrow to protect staff and students, but also broad enough to understand that there are circumstances when it is perfectly appropriate. And I think that this policy, the Gbgb, does a better job at getting at that than the old policy.
I had to work on a very similar project at my work recently, because we deal with hundreds and hundreds of campers each year. And you have younger staff where, they all want to text and chat and social with each other. And the way we clarified it for them was, just as you as an educator did not put yourself alone in a room with a child without a third party knowing, and even then probably not, treat digital spaces the same way. Are you in a one-on-one digital space that's unlogged and unmonitored? Then you're opening yourself up to liability. People seem to grab onto that one.
Yes, but there may be times again where you're going to be in a one-on-one conversation with a student because that student is your babysitter. So they're just all of those types of nuances. I think this and like I said, I think this policy
It seems to spell it out pretty clear.
does a better job of spelling it out than our previous
Yeah.
policy.
Pat, under item F, can we consider adding vaping in there? And probably change drugs to illegal drugs.
F,
Yeah, associating with students at any time in a situation or activity could be considered sexually suggestive or involving the presence of tobacco.
I don't think we're looking at the same policy.
GBEB?
Right here?
I'm suggesting that
Double E.
we get rid of, right, GBEB.
I'm sorry.
Single.
And so look at GBEBB.
I was in the wrong one. I'm sorry
Okay.
about that.
You see it now, yeah.
We actually don't have that in the new one, like explicitly listed.
Alcohol, drugs,
Yeah,
yeah,
it just says personal interaction and relationships, mutual respect and trust, which makes more sense.
um. Let's see, the note, that note reflects on any investigation into alcohol, illegal drugs, et cetera, but it's not laid out. I don't see it in A through what's the end there? A through P here. No.
Yeah, I kind of took that out and just went with the.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because that's a values call in, or like if you are, say, at a social function and you're a smoker and a student arrives, it's not illegal, but it's maybe not the best mentor relationship. Same with alcohol use, but then illegal drugs would be in a different category.
Oh, yeah. Well, illegal and legal drugs in a different category. I mean, you know, again, like.
Well, I was thinking more like, you're taking your arthritis medicine, like that's a drug, but it's not. I mean, Pat, what do you think? Like that line being taken out is, I guess it's keeping the school's expectation of employee behavior closer to the workplace and less involved in social spaces. Which maybe is appropriate. Like, I don't love the idea of teachers smoking in front of kids at a baseball game, but it's also.
You're not going to prohibit that, right? That's not something that we can, and we're not going to prohibit if they're vaping. And you're right, if they're family friends. And so you have a teacher who is with their best friend, that family who happens to also be a student, and there's alcohol. That's not illegal. That's not necessarily, would that be viewed as being inappropriate? I mean, that those situations may indeed happen. So to say that in the presence of tobacco, alcohol, there may be circumstances in which a student could be in the presence of alcohol and tobacco where a teacher is,
Well, if the teacher's having a burger and a beer at the depot and the student walks in.
right,
What do you do?
right.
Well, and it sort of continues on to that appearance of impropriety, because it doesn't necessarily say the building, right? But it's just the relationship.
Yeah.
That's kind of where it goes and it leaves it.
Now, obviously, if a staff member were providing alcohol to a student, that's illegal. Regardless of your policy,
Oh,
Right,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
illegal.
Yeah.
That's an
And
actual
that
crime.
would result in immediate administrative leave while an investigation took place. And then we would go from there depending upon the results of the investigation.
I don't know if it's necessary to be in here. There's a weird gray area where, you might have an employee who's engaged in illegal conduct in the presence of a student outside of their employment. Is that grounds for dismissal?
Depending upon the conduct, yes. However, if I have a staff member who goes into a store and steals a can of soda,
Sure.
and a student happens to see it, that was illegal, but I don't necessarily have the ability to fire someone over that.
Hmm.
I've had that happen to me. I know I don't have the authority to
It's
fire someone over that,
As much as you might, yeah.
as much as you might like,
Want to
you
intervene
know?
on that, yeah.
That's interesting. Is it because it's a misdemeanor? Like if it had been a diamond watch instead of a can of soda, I don't think it would have shaken out the same way.
You're right, and that happened to me so many years ago. I can't tell you all the nuances as to why I couldn't, but I could not.
I mean, if we cut to the chase about why bother to have a policy like this in the first place, it's so there's a clear line for staff that they know what's acceptable and not, and a clear line for you so you know what's actionable and not, or not.
Mhm. I mean, I personally am comfortable with this policy as it's written.
Okay.
And I don't feel like it needs anything else added. As I said at the beginning, I feel like this policy is actually better written than the policy that we currently have. I think it provides greater clarity. I don't know, Al, I mean, what's your thought?
As I read it, I don't see anything that's unreasonable here. I was just trying to think of, as I was reading, boy, has this ever happened? Do I know about any of this? And I can't think of examples where things would have crossed a line here, except unintentionally. Socializing or spending time with students outside of school-sponsored events. As you said, if I have a close personal relationship with somebody in town whose child happens to be a student and I'm at their house, am I socializing with them? I don't think anybody would interpret it that way, but maybe they would. There are some gray areas there that are hard to define, and I don't think you're going to be able to escape that.
I mean, unfortunately, it does happen from time to time, and I have been in
Right.
a situation where those lines are crossed. It's not common, but it
And
does.
it's usually
unfortunately.
pretty blatant, right?
It
I mean,
is
that's-
pretty blatant.
We all know it when we see it.
Yep. So,
Seems to me for the purpose like you described, that we should just do it the better, and probably if it's the next round when we get a little more, in detail of the updates, I think this one makes sense for the way it's written.
What do you think? I'm still curious why they sort of didn't have alcohol, illegal drugs, that kind of thing in there. I tend to want that, although if you're good, I trust your application. Is there any benefit in leaving the note in there, like pulling it out of brackets and using some of that language in there?
There are times where we absolutely maintain notes because we feel like it's really important to have that information in there. If you would like to keep the note in, because that does help provide some additional clarity around the expectations about the use of alcohol, drugs, abuse. We certainly can do
Stalking.
that.
Yeah. I would want to leave that in there because I think it does provide good clarity. Do we need to reference it anywhere else, like see covered investigation?
No, I
No,
mean, it's
just-
already
it's in there,
referenced
yeah.
up there.
Yeah, it's got the law.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
And again, right, if there's a violation of that, it's a violation of that statute.
right.
Right, right,
Which is, would
right.
supersede the policy anyway. But maybe just as a clarifying piece of, where it's in there, and then I don't see the site, the statutory citation at the bottom here.
Right,
The cross
I
reference.
just noticed that
Yeah.
as well.
But if that'll be all right, I would like to leave
Sure.
the note.
It does say it needs to be in the student handbooks.
Yes, it does. So when
Oh,
you
yeah.
look at GB. Okay, that, I'm glad you said that because here, even GBEB, it
Oh, we
doesn't
gotta
say.
check it off, yep.
So I need to put it over here so administrators know
Oh, nice.
that it has to be in the student handbook.
Yeah, so that, yeah.
Okay. All right,
That's why we do this.
that's why we do this, so it's helpful. Okay, great. I'm keeping an eye on the time.
Yeah.
We're about an hour and a half in. We're
Yeah.
gonna try to be done by 7. The Gbgb workplace bullying, this is something I also mentioned to you that it's a new law that just goes into effect on Monday. And so this proposed policy was just put together by Maine School Management, and it reflects the language in the new law.
Includes cyberbullying too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So questions or concerns about this one?
That's what the chain of command. and-
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I have not.
Do we have an affirmative action officer?
It's Terry.
Terry does it all.
Terry keeps coming up.
I don't recall a single complaint of workplace bullying since I've been here. I don't think that there's been any staff member who has come to me saying that another staff member is bullying them. I mean, of course, there may be disagreements that can be worked through, but nothing to the degree that this law talks about.
You know, it kind of covers students and parents. That's why I was looking at the very end too.
Right,
So,
correct. And now that is a different story,
yeah, I was gonna say.
especially nowadays.
Yes.
We have had some staff members who have felt bullied by parents.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
I think as it's written makes sense because it gives you the authority to handle it as it needs to be handled.
Correct.
Yeah.
Actually, just a quick spelling thing, and the examples of workplace bullying. Place, 1, 2, 3, screaming or swearing at an employee. The second sentence there, placing an employee in reasonable fear of physical harm. And so it says fur or physical harm.
Fear of,
I
good
think
catch, thank you. Yep.
Don't you think it could be fear or physical?
In reasonable fear, sure, yeah. Fear or fear of,
I think it's fear of physical harm, right? Placing in a reasonable fear of physical harm.
That's where it gets a little objective, yeah.
yeah.
That's the other.
All right. How about GBJ, which is personal records? This, again, this is your current policy. No significant changes, just some pronoun changes. But other than that, it looked pretty straightforward to me.
And it leaves it so it could be a physical or an electronic record, I assume, so we didn't have to delineate between, because you might have both.
The personnel files are, the complete personnel files are all paper.
They are, okay, yep.
If we're set with that, then the evaluation of administrative staff. I just updated the legal reference. You've already seen this. You actually just approved
did, yeah.
what that system looks like.
Yeah.
Along with the TPEG, which would be your teacher's evaluation process. So this should be current. Tutoring for pay, I don't have any changes there. Under admission of resident students, and if I'm going too fast, stop me. Just the only change, real change here is that what second paragraph, when it states that the residence established for the purpose of free school attendance in this unit, it's just like this district. I just felt was a more appropriate terminology.
I had a question on this one.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th paragraph down. Is the requirement for an original birth certificate state law or a practice of the district?
I would have to pull out the law book, but I think it's state law.
If it's not, I would suggest striking that. I think simply residency within the district should be sufficient.
Without providing a birth certificate at all? Yeah, I answered the question whether original, I was focused on original birth certificate or just a birth certificate. Birth certificate is required by law. That is in the law book, that they have to provide a birth certificate.
But not necessarily original.
I just don't know if it's original. I'd have to pull the book out. I can highlight that and find out, but that is not.
Before you dig into the law book, has it come up? Somebody can't find their original?
Yes. Yeah, and when that happens, there is language in the law book that tells us how to proceed. And I've had to pay, I don't remember how much money, it's not a lot, but I've had to pay to be able to get a birth certificate from, I don't even remember the name of the agency. It's a state agency, and I had to go there and ask for a birth certificate.
vital records.
But is it the vital records one? Okay, yeah. So,
Is there a section that covers immigrants to the US who may not have a birth certificate? Like what happens in that case?
I don't know. I'm not sure that I can answer that tonight. We haven't been in that situation yet, but other school districts have. So we would consult the department and they would advise us on how to proceed. So.
Should we have that in there? Consult the department in the unavailability of a birth certificate, or maybe it's never generated as an international.
I don't know if it's really necessary. I mean, you already have, it says that the law book, that the law outlines exceptions. that
Okay.
apply in determining a student's right. It
Yeah.
already says that,
Yep.
so.
Okay, yeah,
I
so,
already
yep.
know that that's what I need to
Yep,
do.
Okay.
You're gonna laugh at me. I'm gonna suggest you don't use the word photocopies and just say copies.
Right.
Where are you? Oh, yep.
There was actually a pretty notable loss case about whether or not something's a photocopy versus a copy, because photocopy is a trademark term.
Oh,
Okay.
Good. Good point.
All right, I'll make that change. All right, then there's also a law on the admission of non-resident
go.
students. So this is where we have like superintendent's agreements that apply. And then we have situations where, you know, a student might be living with a family member, but not a custodial family member. And so the law applies to that as well. So it provides us language on how to proceed.
And it looks like that all goes through you, goes to the
Yes, it
superintendent.
all goes through me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was really tickled to see the language under E that refers to the
Yeah.
children of lighthouse keepers. Apparently,
Yeah. I know the fog warning or.
I don't think there are any manned
They're
lighthouses
not a
left in
single
the
man lighthouse in
country.
the country now.
Yeah.
I should check to see if the law still states that. I mean, I checked this with Maine School Management, so I'm pretty certain that it's still in the law, but I'll double check just to make sure.
It paints sort of a tragic picture. You have homeless children in state agencies, and then the children of lighthouse keepers.
Yeah.
It's like Pete's Dragon. It makes me think of.
So then we have admission of homeless students, and once again, we have our policy. And then we have MSMA's version, and our policy combines the administrative rules along with the overarching policy. And I am proposing, although I didn't write that, I would propose that we rescind our policy and replace it with the other two policies, so that we would have a JFABD. And then we would have a JFABD-R that would provide much greater detail on how we are to support homeless students.
So these are in addition, they're not replacing any, right?
It would replace our JFABD. I would replace our version with the
Oh, I got
MSMA
you. At
version,
the same number. Yeah, gotcha.
and
Okay.
then add the R so that we would have two
Yeah,
policies.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah. Certainly more succinct.
Yeah. I thought so too, as I reviewed it. I
Yeah.
thought it was much better. All right, then we have, let's see. Mine's out of order. I have dropout prevention. This is our current policy. The law dictates the membership. So I just eliminated a couple MSAD11s, but I did not make any other changes. I made sure that I shared this policy with Jared as the new chair of dropout prevention. I know they've struggled to get membership. And so I wanted him to know who he should be reaching out to. I've also spoken to the adult ed director and ask the adult ed director who works with dropouts to be serving on this committee as well.
Actually, just jumping back on the MSAD11 piece, on the previous one, we just moved past the admission of homeless students. I see a couple of MSAD11s or several, and they're not MSAD number 11s, they're just MSAD11.
Oh, I see.
So I don't know if they didn't show up in a search.
I
or
don't know. Sometimes I put number, sometimes I don't.
something. Okay,
Do you have a preference?
I don't, I'm fine with it. I just wanted to note it.
Yeah, this particular one, it kept saying insert name
Yeah.
of your, right?
Yeah, okay,
So
cool. Rest of
I can do numbers because that is what we've been doing, right?
that's yeah,
Just to try
It's
to
there.
be. All right.
Thank
All right, that takes care of that. Then we have, go back up to the Jkaa, use of physical restraint and seclusion. This is the updated version from Main School, from Drummond Woodsum, that reflects the new law that is, again, going into effect. And I shared with the board last week the impact and what those changes were. And as you can see, that we should not make any changes to this policy at all without consulting with our attorneys.
And this one says handbook as well, Pat.
Yes,
Yep.
this absolutely, let's see.
Just curious, do you know if anybody's planning on challenging this law?
I do not know if anyone's going to challenge. There is speculation that some may try to put in a new bill to modify it, but I don't know that for a fact either.
I think the intent is laudable, but the implementation, especially at the younger ages, is a little unrealistic.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
I couldn't get my kid to bed at night under this law.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But even at the high school, I mean, again,
Yeah.
realistically, that if you have a teacher who is doing a detention and they have to use a restroom and the child is old enough to be alone for 2 minutes as the teacher runs to the restroom, if that student feels that they can't leave, now that teacher just secluded the child and has to fill out paperwork for a seclusion. Same thing, meeting with a building principal, child was in trouble, needed to, the building principal had to go get something from the secretary, child couldn't leave. Now that's a seclusion. And so there's paperwork that has to be filled out. It's really unrealistic.
There were 19 items on the paperwork.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I have made a note that these new laws require that the restraint and seclusion be in the handbook because the previous laws did not require that. And yes, so people have to go in and make some modifications here, like on page 3, it says, like insert appropriate administrator, that type of stuff. I didn't make any of those changes. I wanted you to see this for what it was.
How about as you get down further, Pat, I'm actually in the next one, the R,
Mhm.
for the procedures. It also looks like they're adding all these reporting requirements,
Mhm.
like under number 7. Numbers of physical restraint placed in, like, so now you have to capture all this data as well and report it to the DOE.
Yes.
Yeah,
Now, we already had to do a lot of data, but yes, they're asking for even more.
even more
than-
by
than
building.
before.
Okay, and it looks like quarterly and annual.
Yes, and we already did that. We were
Okay.
already required to
Okay.
provide any type of restraint and seclusion. So there's paperwork that whenever, if a student is restrained, that paperwork has to be done within a set amount of time, and that has to cross my desk. So I have a record of it, and Martha is responsible for reporting that to the Department of Education.
Just I guess a clarifying question. The fact of doing a seclusion or having an incident makes them have an IEP or a 504? Or why does that keep being referenced?
Oftentimes, a student who has an IEP or 504, students who have behavioral issues oftentimes fall under that category, but that doesn't mean that all students.
Right, that's why I'm just curious why they keep referencing that. Oh, I see, actually, the next section says all other students. Okay, sorry about that, thank you. Those are the ones we have to do, so I don't think we have
Yeah,
much say.
We have to, yeah, we just have to.
Yeah.
So if you're okay with that, then let's look at the last one. And this is administration of medication to students. So I've gone through our policy with our nurses or with our lead nurse. And the law changed this year so that we can include naloxone. And she recommends that we do. So the optional language here is that is being recommended, the first optional is being recommended by our nursing staff to include that. We already have SROs that are carrying it, they're in our buildings. So they are supportive at that level, at the high school, possibly at the middle school, to have that in supply just in case.
Now it mentions the nurse to stock and possess it as well. Did she recommend that too?
That the what?
The nurse, the second part of it saying we authorize the school nurse to stock and possess it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that first optional, that one, do you
Okay.
mean? Yes, that's the one there as written.
Okay,
That is what they're recommending.
okay,
And then I kept for you, in case you weren't supportive, the second optional, but that's if you did not authorize. So if you agree to authorize it, then I will just eliminate that, right?
okay.
Including the first optional, and I think that makes sense. Actually, I just want to close the quote that's in there. I don't see it's a
Collaborative
a
practice.
quote collaborative practice agreement, and there's
Yeah.
no end quote. I don't know what,
Where it is.
yeah, I don't know where it ends.
Yeah, it's supposed to end after agreement.
Agreement, yep.
So I'm just gonna say it out loud, even if it's wrong, just so I can figure it out in my head. If we authorize this, the nurse is then authorized by us to provide this treatment to a person at their discretion. But that treatment is probably outside the scope of their initial enrollment agreement and or standing health order. So what happens if we have a nurse mistakenly authorize this treatment? Are we covered?
And so you're referring to like with a student specifically?
Well, it's just think about like you have a student and the nurse administers a treatment not previously authorized by the parent.
Okay, all right,
Oh,
so,
right. If they're a minor, especially, you're
Right, so
saying.
let's say it's EpiPens instead, just the
Yeah.
nurse sees somebody having a fit and like
Yeah.
hits them with an EpiPen. Turns out they don't actually have an allergic reaction, but they get harmed somehow by the administration of the treatment. Where do we land on that?
when it comes to liability, if it was, well-intended and it wasn't neglect, then we're covered. We're covered under insurance, and we are free from
Okay.
nuisance lawsuits.
So
I can't
the
tell you
other
the
party would have to
terminology,
show-
I don't remember, but we're covered. Because, that can happen, but if within their capacity, they were following the protocols and doing what they needed to do in that particular case to save a person's life, then they would be free from.
And it looks like they're still working on the law for the management of it. That's sort of that next piece. That's what I was thinking too, because hopefully you don't have a likelihood of needing this in lower grades, right? But
Yeah,
the nurse would have to be savvy enough to know that's what it is, to your
Right.
point,
right.
you know? Yeah.
So the part where it says prescribed by a legally authorized individual, does that mean our medical partners, Gardner Family Practice, they have like a standing order they give our
They
nursing
would-
team?
They would need to, yeah, they would have to work with our school doctor. And this, of course, could be a visitor.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it says on school grounds or at a school
Right.
event, right?
Is there similar language that covers AED use? Because I bet it's probably the same thing.
Oh, okay,
Yes, we
good.
do have a policy on that. Yes, we do.
I don't have an objection to it. I just wanted to be sure I understood the language.
mhm.
Well, I think it's good to understand where the parallels are, and yeah, if we're introducing new, new concepts. I like that the training, the nurse or designated trained school personnel,
Right.
so that there's that, we're not just handing them out, obviously, it's,
Right.
authorized people, so there is that chain of command kind of idea. And actually, so that first optional piece actually mirrors the epinephrine auto injectors.
Correct.
Just to look at that one for a second, that one doesn't specify who's administering the auto injector. The naloxone one obviously specifies the nurse or trained personnel. Yeah.
This is the new policy that came out.
This. And do we need it for, like a student might be able to do it themselves?
Yeah, and lower in G, it says
It,
unlicensed personnel such as, right, who administer must receive training before being
Um,
authorized to do so.
No, that's a great catch. I
Um,
highlighted it, but I obviously didn't incorporate it. When I did my scan, I highlighted that was missing from this policy. See how I highlighted it, but I did not actually. So
Very
thank you,
good.
that was a great catch.
And-
So it should say by the school nurse or designated trained school personnel.
the one above it does say self-administration by students, but it's possible that the student may be incapacitated,
Right, yeah.
and somebody would have to be doing that.
Okay,
You need like a highlighter that also like
absolutely.
injects it over into the new one.
Yeah,
So,
copies it like an electronic pen copy.
yeah, is there an app for that?
So that is it for policies then.
Wow.
Was H
And-
already in that policy? I'm
Was
just
what?
curious. Administrative medical marijuana was already in there?
We have a different policy on, oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I get confused.
Yeah.
There's some policies where they're combined.
Yeah,
The marijuana policy, was already included.
okay.
There are some school districts that have it separate.
Mhm.
It depends. There's a Drummond and Woodsum combines it, main school management separates it, and so ours happens to be combined.
Okay.
Then the only other thing is that job description. If you're
I think it
okay
makes
with
sense, yeah.
that, both Terry and I have reviewed it.
No,
this-
you know
I
what it is.
created it and Terry reviewed it. so-
Excellent.
And made some modifications.
I have, I'm good with the job description, and I know we're almost done, but I found another he, a pronoun thing, a he, she, in one of the ones I just looked at. If I do the search, so sorry to go back at this point. BIC.
Okay. Yep, I see it.
Yeah.
They have, okay.
And this job description that you did for this, it would apply to Terry and or anyone who would meet the qualifications. We don't have to worry about that.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. But it just means someone off the street can't come in
Right.
and do it,
Yeah,
you know, we made it specific to the tech department, so.
Yep, makes sense.
So we would need, I guess, Tony, a motion
So
to send to the board first,
I would,
second read.
we would move that we send this bundle to the board for, sorry, for a first reading.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
Nope.
Further
Okay.
discussion? Yeah.
Makes sense.
All right, if we could take the vote then, to move to the board.
Yes.
Awesome,
Yeah.
and then
were
we
very
are
efficient, I have
done.
to say.
Did we do that?
We did it.
Awesome, that was a lot, that was a lot. Normally, it's not this many, and usually we do it within an hour prior
Right.
to the board meeting, but
That would have been a lot to
we
do.
needed to get a jump start, and we knew that with the laws, the new laws going into effect on Monday, that we needed to spend a little more time tonight going through these changes to make sure that our process is moving forward.
We should say you knew and reminded us, thank you, that we should
Well,
do
that's-
those things.
That's my job, that's my
Yes.
job.
Excellent.
All right, well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Alan, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
I hope this was informative.
Riveting to your ears.
Yeah, riveting, right?